Nuclear fusion, the holy grail of clean energy. Atoms smashed together, creating 4 times more energy per kilogram of fuel than traditional nuclear fission, and 4 million times more than burning coal, with no greenhouse gases or long-term radioactive waste. If all goes to plan, it'll be at least a $1 trillion market. The problem?
Only working fusion power plants right now in the universe are stars.
Now it's a worldwide race to change
That is a complication.
that. The closest anyone's come was at the National Ignition Facility in California in 2022, with a brief but crucial moment of net positive fusion energy. But despite decades of US leadership, China is catching up, building faster and spending twice as much to beat the US to it.
If you care about AI, if you care about, energy leadership, you have to make investments into fusion. This is something that if the United States doesn't lead on, then China will.
New satellite images show China's rapid build-out of a giant new laser fusion site, twice the size of the California lab. Another huge state-funded project opens this year, and yet another is scheduled for 2027. This at a time when the US has only upgraded existing machines, some of them 30-plus years old. At this rate, some say China could surpass the US in 3 or 4 years.
As a Western person, I'm scared. I want to make sure we succeed.
A new report from senators and fusion experts is calling for $10 billion of federal funds to keep fusion from suffering the same fate as EV batteries and solar.
Curious why that individual said that he was scared about that information, but maybe they'll elaborate on that soon.
For now, it's a race between state-supported Chinese projects and private startups, the vast majority of which are based in the US. Like Helion, with $1 billion from investors like OpenAI's Sam Altman, and a highly ambitious deal with Microsoft to deliver fusion power to the grid by 2028.
You're not going to have any new fission power in America by 2028. No less fusion power.
Google's backed TAE Technologies raised $1.2 billion. Commonwealth Fusion Systems has raised the most, nearly $2 billion, from the likes of Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and Google.
You can't just punt this down the road and say, well, fusion, what is that? We don't know what's happening. It is happening in China.
We sat down with 3 of the biggest US startups and fusion experts to find out what's at stake and ask what they're doing about China gaining ground in the race to commercial, limitless, clean atomic energy.
Army cameras 6 miles away recorded the historic moment in the black of night.
The US first harnessed nuclear reactions 80 years ago, using it to create the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. Those used the energy created when atoms split apart, fission, which went on to power nuclear plants, and more recently, small modular reactors, SMRs, which are seeing big investments from the likes of Amazon and Google as a way to power AI data centers.
The AI boom kind of came out of left field when it became clear the sheer volume of power that was going to be required.
While the US still has the most active nuclear power plants, China is now king in new projects. Despite breaking ground on its first reactor nearly 4 decades after the US pioneered the tech, China is now building far more fission power plants than any other country. China entered the fusion race in the early 2000s, about 50 years after the US. That's when China joined the US and some 32 other nations to collaborate on ITER, the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor megaproject in France.
But since then, they are training many more plasma physicists, fusion scientists, than are being trained at American universities. We know they're moving faster than the US government program.
The first large-scale use of fusion was a US hydrogen bomb test in 1952. But in the 7 decades since, scientists have struggled to harness more energy than is used to heat and sustain the fusion fuel. Fusion is the way stars, including our sun, make energy. The fuel is hydrogen, a light, abundant element in comparison to the heavy, scarce uranium used by fission. When hydrogen atoms reach extreme enough temperatures, up to 270 million degrees, 10 times hotter than the sun, the pressure causes them to fuse together, forming a superheated gas called plasma. When they fuse, they create helium, shedding some mass in the process, which can be turned into huge amounts of energy. But the plasma is hard to control. It does respond to magnetic fields, allowing for magnetic confinement fusion, where the plasma is suspended and controlled inside a donut-shaped tokamak. In inertial confinement fusion, high-energy lasers are pointed at a peppercorn-sized pellet of fuel, rapidly compressing and imploding it. That's how the US pulled off the historic first fusion ignition, producing net positive energy at the Lawrence Livermore National Ignition Facility, NIF, in 2022.
That is actually pretty cool.
For a very, very brief time, literally nanoseconds, 192 lasers, each of which is the most powerful laser in the world, all fired onto a small target about the size of a BB. That fusion fuel then ignited and released more energy than was put onto the target. The next step, though, is to show that you can do it in a commercially relevant manner.
Up to now, fusion has required a ton of capital for huge facilities. Think giant laser bays and massive tokamaks. That's why some startups are trying new ways of controlling plasma in hopes of scaling down. Zap Energy sends a bolt of electricity through it. Bezos-backed General Fusion uses steam pistons. Helion uses magnetic pulses to send plasmas toward each other at more than 1 million miles per hour in a cylinder instead of a tokamak. TAE Technologies uses a different kind of fuel and particle beams.
Whoever has essentially abundant, limitless energy, it can impact everything you think of, from healthcare to access to food and water, the principal things to find quality of life, all of it. And I think that is a scary thought if that's in the wrong hands.
But when it comes
Well, we did learn what he was afraid of.
to public support, China is way ahead. The Department of Energy estimates Beijing is putting a reported $1.5 billion annually toward the effort, while U.S. federal dollars for fusion have averaged about $800 million annually the last few years. And in 2023, the DOE says China's fusion investments were more than those of all other countries combined.
The Chinese system is famously opaque and difficult to see as an outsider.
One thing we do know, for now, the bigger the reactor, the more efficiently it can heat and confine the plasma, so the higher chance for net positive energy. And China's newest fusion project is massive. Satellite images show a rapid build-out in 2024 of 4 laser bays pointing at a containment dome where the fusion reaction will occur. That dome alone is roughly the size of a football field, about twice as big as NIF, the U.S. laser fusion effort. Fusion Industry Association leader Andrew Holland says it's likely a fusion-fission hybrid.
A fusion-fission hybrid essentially is like replicating a bomb, but as a power plant. It would never work, never fly in a place like the United States, where you have a regulatory regime that determines safety, but in a regime like China, where it doesn't matter what the people who live next door say. If the government says we want to do it, we're going to do it.
And China's existing national tokamak project, East, has been setting records, volleying with France's national project, West, in the last couple months for the longest ever containment of plasma inside a reactor, although that's a less monumental milestone than net positive energy. So how is China breaking ground with a technology the U.S. pioneered?
Anything in a command economy where the government makes a decision that this is a priority is going to move faster. Is it going to be better? Was anything that the Soviets built better than what we had? Absolutely not. But was it faster, and did they have more of them? Yeah, definitely.
One shortcut, China's known for copying America's technology.
The United States has a strategy completed in 2020 during the first Trump administration. Congress has not done anything to spend the money to put this into action. We published this thing, and the Chinese then went and built it. Craft, that is essentially the U.S. plan.
Craft, a $700 million, 100-acre fusion campus in eastern China, is set to reach completion this year. And a new state-funded tokamak called BEST is expected to be finished in 2027.
I'm not sure how valid it is to be upset about something when you had the opportunity to take the lead and you just didn't take it, and then somebody followed along and said, why not do the thing that they thought to do, but didn't? It seems like you willingly gave up with your lead. It seems unreasonable to be upset about it afterwards.
U.S. fusion startup Helion also says some smaller Chinese projects are copying its patented designs.
There's 3 different groups, actually, that are doing something very similar to what Helion has patented. Use these schematics and the designs from the patents and go try to copy it directly.
As China rapidly builds, the U.S. national projects are running on existing, decades-old machines.
You build something new, it attracts more people. It's exciting, right? You work on cutting-edge stuff. Nobody wants to work on old dinosaurs in a way. And there's a bit of a brain drain then, right?
President Trump ramped up support for nuclear, including fusion, during his first term, which continued under Biden. It's unclear what fusion funding will look like in Trump's second term, amid massive federal downsizing. But in the early 2000s, budget cuts to domestic fusion research forced universities to halt work on new machines and send researchers to learn on other countries' machines, including China's.
Instead of building new ones, we went to China and helped them build theirs, thinking, well, that'd be great. Well, they'll have the facility, we'll be really smart, we'll learn from it, and we won't have any of our own facilities. Well, that was a big mistake.
According to one report, China now has more fusion patents than any other country, and 10 times the US number of PhDs in fusion science and engineering.
There's a finite labor pool in the West that all the companies compete for. That is a fundamental constraint.
There's also a huge amount of materials needed to build fusion projects and build them fast. So China is trying to corner the supply chain in a similar play to how it came to dominate solar and EV batteries.
China is investing 10 times the rate that the United States is in advanced material development. That's something we have got to change. And so this is materials like the inner first wall of the fusion machines, the high power magnets that we use to contain the fusion fuel in the fusion plasma.
China.
This does seem like something that we could change. America, I think, still has the largest GDP out of any other country at the moment. And so there's no reason another country could out-invest us unless we're allowing them to do that. Clearly, we haven't made this a priority, which I think is this individual's point, which is we should be investing more. And so maybe this will happen. I think this has happened in the past where the US gets ahead, maybe they slow down a bit, somebody starts to beat them, and then they say, oh no, that's not acceptable. We can't have somebody beat us now. Let's go chase after that same goal and try to beat them as well. So I suspect that would happen. I'm not as worried about this, and I'm also not as worried about that potentially like dystopian or apocalyptic scenario that individual was worried about earlier. I'm not sure what China would do if they made this work, and also I doubt there would be a scenario where they made this work and then suddenly everything, they just have unlimited power that day. They can just go bananas with AI and other stuff and just start hacking the US or whatever those people think they're going to do. Presumably there would still be a lot of time after they actually find a way to make it sustainable is to expand it out, set up more infrastructure, figure out what you're going to do with it. So I'm personally not as worried. Maybe if any of you are, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd be happy to hear your theories.
Is also securing markets for necessities like capacitors and power semiconductors.
Our Polaris 7th generation system that is now operational, its timeline was set entirely by semiconductors. Literally buying those semiconductors from overseas, bringing them to the United States to plug them in to run a fusion system.
Shanghai-based Energy Singularity told CNBC China's efficient supply chain is a major benefit. In June, it says it successfully created plasma in record time, just 2 years after beginning the design of its tokamak. Still, the US has China beat in one main area, the private sector, which is taking off in a big way. Of the 40 private companies in the Fusion Industry Association, Holland says 25 of them are in the US.
And since the FIA was founded in May 2021, I think we had about $1.2 billion invested in private companies around the world. And today, we can report that it's well over $8 billion. About $6 billion of that is invested into American companies.
Commonwealth, spun out of MIT in 2018, is Holland's pick for getting to commercial fusion first. Around 2027 is when its Spark tokamak plans to use superconducting magnets to reach net positive energy.
About 10 times more power out than in, and about 100 megawatts. Now that's never been done. Those are the conditions that form the basis of a power plant.
Which is Commonwealth's next project, a 400 megawatt fusion power plant planned for Virginia called ARC. And it's not just the US. Jeff Bezos and Microsoft are backing General Fusion in Canada. A handful of fusion startups are scattered across Europe, India, and Japan. Most of these countries, plus China and Russia, are also collaborating on ITER, but that's hit major delays, with a revised timeline putting its completion at 2039 or later, far past when US startups say they'll get there.
First electrons on the grid in 2028.
Putting power in the grid in the early 2030s.
Somewhere around late in either end of the decade or early 2030s.
But the question remains, could China get there even sooner?
China's not on the path that I can see to do it first. I'm worried about the 100th one. I want to make sure that we get that best out there. We iterate, we evolve the technology.
Even though the first ones might be in the US, I don't think we should take comfort in that. We should actually be thinking about a sustained system. The finish line is actually a mature fusion industry that's producing products for use around the world, including in AI centers.
Fusion's going to be needed. We just need to move on from discussing things to actually putting things into action and building them. Everybody's moving as fast as they can.
Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please hit like or subscribe. I'll see you around.